Hello, I am your host, Joshua Griffith, here on the Unnamed Sports Show on the Sports Talk Line Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. Today on the show, I will be looking back at the NCAA March Madness tournament and looking ahead to the Final Four on Saturday. To help me do that will be a friend of the show, guest Lukas Weese, who will join me shortly. But before we get to that, make sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button to the Sports Talk Line channel, and comment along with me and let me know your March Madness thoughts. So we got all of that paperwork taken care of. So without further ado, let's get right to Lukas Weese, who's fresh off media availability for the Final Four teams. All right, so now to the part that everyone's been waiting for. So happy to be joined now by friend of the show, contributor on almost everything it seems these days. He's got bylines in Sportsnet, Toronto Star, USA Today, and the host of Weese Sports Chronicles, Lukas Weese. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Great to be back, Josh. Thanks so much for having me.
So obviously things aren't going very good out west here. People aren't really figuring it out, but how are things in the East? Are you and your family doing safe and healthy?
We are. I mean, just, taking it day by day. I mean, I know we mentioned off the air, it's been 13 months since we've sort of, lived the same way, but no, I mean, just trying to stay safe and do our part to protect each other and to protect our fellow citizens in Ontario. But hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, this year we can get that vaccine and start to get back to living a normal life again.
Yes, it would be nice and get some full stadiums of fans. And one thing that would be nice to have fans for is the NCAA March Madness tournament. So, Lukas, you've been covering that among other things right now. Really enjoyed your work, all of your pieces on spotlighting some of the Canadian athletes in the tournament. Obviously, I want to get to that a little bit later. But what's been your overall thoughts of the tournament so far? Any moments that really stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a great tournament. I mean, obviously the NCAA tournament didn't happen last year. It was one of the events that got canceled and it never got rescheduled. I mean, everything seemed to get postponed from last year in 2020 and then finish later than normal. But the NCAA tournament got canceled and that was it, right? I mean, that was the end of the season. So to have it back, I think it's different. Obviously, the stadiums aren't packed to the brim. I mean, but there have been some really exciting moments. I mean, it was only just a few days into the tournament that it actually set a record, Josh, for the most amount of upsets, which is incredible. I mean, that's what the NCAA tournament's all about. I would be remiss if I didn't mention how great the women's tournament's also been. I mean, that's really, had some incredible games in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8. So, I mean, given just trying to do a season in the middle of a global pandemic, trying to stage a March Madness at one site in Indianapolis, when normally it's spread across the country, it truly is remarkable. Hopefully, I mean, I'm knocking on wood here. We get to the finish line. No further issues so that we can have a fantastic Final Four and an even better national championship.
And it would be nice too if we had the one cancellation early, but that's it. Yep. So far it's been smooth sailing. So I did knock on wood. So hopefully we should be good for the Final Four and the finals on Monday. So you mentioned that we had a record number of upsets just in the first couple of days. What did you think the biggest upset was just in the tournament overall? I mean, could have been one of the ones early or even, I mean, look at the Elite 8 Michigan UCLA game. So
yeah, I mean, from the earlier days, I mean, you can't ignore, I mean, a 15th seed upsetting a 2 seed in Oral Roberts, upsetting Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State was one of the finalists in the Big Ten tournament. So they were sort of coming into the tournament hot. And then look what happened. I mean, a 15th seed upsetting a 2 seed. It hadn't happened in a few years. So that's always a huge upset. I think of Abilene Christian on one of the final nights of the first round, upsetting the University of Texas. I mean, this is a school that was a D2 program for many years until just a few years ago. I think in 2019, they made the NCAA tournament and they sort of treated it as a vacation. But this time around, it was like they meant business. And I mean, I was fortunate to do a story on them and just sort of how they were able to navigate not just the pandemic, but also the winter storm that occurred in Texas and just trying to overcome that. And just, it was an incredible upset, incredible defensive performance from them. So I would say those two schools, Josh. But then, I mean, look, you can't ignore what the Pac-12 conference has done this year. I mean, 3 Pac-12 teams in the Elite Eight, UCLA pulling off that, upset against Michigan. I mean, always when a 1 seed goes down, that's always a huge upset, particularly before the Final Four. And look, for UCLA to be one of 2 programs to go from the first 4 to the Final Four 10 years apart. I mean, VCU was the first in 2011. 10 years later, you have UCLA doing it. I mean, that's huge. I mean, no one would have expected Mick Cronin's program, given all what they've been through, to get to the Final Four. So I would say those 3. I mean, from the first weekend, Oral Roberts upsetting Ohio State, Abilene Christian upsetting Texas, and then, of course, UCLA, what they've been able to do to just keep the run going, right? Because always sometimes you have the upset, it's hard to follow it up. For UCLA, I mean, they've just been, keep building that momentum and then upsetting Alabama number 2 seed, Michigan number 1 seed. That hasn't happened since 1986 with the LSU Tigers. So an incredible story.
Mick Cronin's got them playing some really good defense, and they are a fun team to watch when you're looking at, Tiger Williams, Jamie Watkins Jr., and Johnny Juzang. They're playing some great basketball. Like I said, great defensive. Do you think they're going to be able to pull off an upset against Gonzaga?
I don't think so. I just think the way Gonzaga played against USC, because I thought going into that Elite Eight matchup, USC Gonzaga, okay, it's the number 1 offense, number one 2-point defense. You got the Mobley twins, who, Evan Mobley's probably going to be a top 3 pick in the upcoming draft, going up against the guards of Jalen Suggs, Andrew Nembhard, but Gonzaga just destroyed them. I mean, their ability to just operate in transition and just get into the paint with no real opposition, no real problems was just incredible to watch. I think UCLA, you're right. I mean, the way they played defense against Michigan was fantastic. I think Johnny Juzang is someone, I mean, I've had the pleasure of speaking with him this week for a story that's coming out for the Undefeated, and just an incredible person. And just for him to sort of bet on himself, leaving Kentucky to go back home. He's from LA. It's an incredible story, and what he's been able to do this tournament, really turning into a breakout star. Like, he was a little bit unknown again because of the Pac-12, West Coast not getting as much love, but he's come to play in this tournament, and averaging over 20 points per game. But I just think, look, that I just can't see UCLA having the offensive scoring weapons to be able to slow down Gonzaga. I mean, I actually think it's going to be interesting those first 10 minutes, Josh. Can UCLA keep it close? Mm-hmm. But I just think the way the Bulldogs are playing right now, the confidence that they have, I mean, it's not like the undefeated teams of the past. This team is legit, and it's going to be hard to beat them.
I mean, going for that undefeated season, that, is another kind of level for them to get at in itself. And you said, like, they're on another level. In the 4 games, they haven't won by fewer than 24 points so far. So it's not like they're even getting close. Like you said, I thought that USC game was going to be okay. Here we go. USC is going to throw in a little bit, but it was like a domination performance by Gonzaga. So it would be nice to see for another storybook, UCLA upset, but I think you're right on that Gonzaga is just too strong.
Yeah. And look, I think there is a point to make that Gonzaga hasn't necessarily played the best teams. I mean, And I mean, the one team this year that has really caused them problems was BYU earlier in the season. They had to overcome a big comeback to win that game. But I just think, look, I mean, you play who you play. I think Gonzaga has, they can beat you in different ways, right? From the guard play, shooting the three, to that transition play, the inside presence of Drew Timme. It's Timme time. And Mark Few's right. I mean, this defense, I mean, the way they've played defense the last two games cannot go unnoticed. I mean, we're going to probably talk about Baylor's defense, Houston's defense, and of course their defenses are great, but don't overlook Gonzaga's defense. Like, for them to be able to slow down some of the high-powered offenses in this tournament, and if you look at USC, the size, like just the size advantage alone, to be able to slow them down and to force turnovers, you can't overlook what Mark Few has been able to do with this Gonzaga defense and just the whole team overall.
He's done a really great job with the program, actually, since he's been there. So really impressive.
Absolutely.
So on the other side of the bracket, obviously, we had two teams making the Final Four for the first time since 1984 and 1950, respectively. So, and it's a pretty even on paper between this one, and one team's going to have, be pretty happy at the end of the day, and one team's going to be heartbroken, like it always is. But who do you think has the upper hand in Baylor and Houston?
I think this game is going to come down to the wire. I think you're absolutely right that you have two teams that are a bit throwback in the sense that they love to rebound. I mean, offensive rebounding in general has declined. I read somewhere to like 28% on average for teams in terms of their offensive rebound rate. But the exceptions to that are Kelvin Sampson's Houston Cougars and Scott Drew's Baylor Bears. So they're a bit of like, they're throwbacks in the way in which they play defense. I mean, I spoke with Quentin Grimes today in his media session, and basically he's saying that Coach Kelvin Sampson, every time he tells his guys, like, when you step on the court, you got to attack the glass. You got to crash the glass and get your rebounds. And when you look at the way in which they out-rebounded Oregon State, 19 offensive rebounds. Like, it was just a masterclass in offensive rebounding. So, look, I mean, to answer your question, I think Houston's going to provide Baylor problems. Like, they've provided any team problems this entire tournament. I think the way they play defense, they're ranked second in the country coming into the tournament in opposing points per game. But I just think that Baylor just has a few more weapons offensively to be able to win this game, whether it's Maceo Teague or Davion Mitchell or I'm a big fan of Jonathan Chichua coming off the bench. I mean, he just provides that spark of energy with his dunks or big blocks. I just think that Baylor, that Villanova game was big for them. They were down 7 at the half. They came back with that game, being able to win in a more slugfest type of approach. Remember, Baylor's the number one team in the country in three-point shooting, and they haven't been great in three-point shooting this entire tournament. So I feel like eventually the three-point game is going to happen for them. So I like Baylor to sneak this one out, but I would not be surprised if Kelvin Sampson's guys pull it out, because I think, again, they've been sort of overlooked a bit, even though they're a 2 seed, they're a bit overlooked, but that defense is legit.
They do force a lot of turnovers as well, too. So I'm joined by Lukas Weese here on the Unnamed Sports Show. So the teams and had media availability this morning for tomorrow night's games. Was there anything that kind of stood out for you specifically? I mean, we'll start with the Houston Baylor game as we're talking about that one.
Yeah, I think just in general, a lot of questions are just being asked about the players' experiences in this bubble, right? I mean, they've been in this bubble now for 3 weeks, so these 4 teams are the longest, and it feels like to me that these guys are enjoying it. I mean, they know it's different. They know it's a bit of a challenge, but I think you really see the bonding happen between the guys. I mean, I know Maceo Teague was talking about for Baylor. I mean, they have annual cornhole games. I mean, away from the court, or I mean, I know Dejan Giroux for Houston. I mean, they brought their video games and are just playing video games, to sort of tap out of the preparation process. I mean, for Scott Drew and Kelvin Sampson, a huge moment for these coaches. I mean, I think for Kelvin Sampson, it's a bit of a redemption for him after what happened in Indiana and just building this program back from, I mean, the depths of irrelevance. I mean, Phi Sama Jama is way before our times, Josh, with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. So for him to do that is really impressive. And then Scott Drew, he took over this program in 2002, 2003. He really talked a lot today in his media availability about his dad at Valparaiso and sort of learning from him about what he took from leading that program and applied it to Baylor in terms of turning a bit of an unnamed, unknown program into national relevance. And here's Scott Drew finally being able to get to the Final Four. He mentioned today how he was setting a bit of the net to former players that he coached. And I feel like he's a real players guy. I mean, when you listen to Scott Drew, he's a real players guy, very optimistic. So I think it's really great for both those coaches to be able to have this opportunity to play in the Final Four.
That's important too in college. That you get a coach that is there and knows how to deal with players because they're young players. I mean, these are young adults. Some of them are still even teenagers, right? So a lot of them are teenagers most of the time. What am I talking about? So what about the Gonzaga and UCL availability? Anything stood out for you there that maybe made you think, okay, this team's maybe ready to go, or this team's like, oh, has some hesitations? I mean, obviously, you'd think Gonzaga would be fired up.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, not many questions in the Gonzaga media availability were sort of asked about UCLA, which usually is sort of the sense of whereas the other media availability, it was like all about Gonzaga and Jalen Suggs.
How are you going to stop them?
The team. So how are you going to stop them, right? So it was a complete sort of contrast in media availabilities. I mean, look, I think Mick Cronin, he's well aware, right? He's well aware of the sort of mountain they have to overcome to get to this, to be Gonzaga. And basically they got to play pretty close to a perfect game. But, Mick Cronin said, like, we're going to be there. We're going to play the game and we're going to see what happens. And that's the beauty of sport, Josh. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, you mentioned earlier about how Gonzaga is one of 4 teams since 1976 to make it to the Final Four undefeated. The previous 3 lost in the Final Four or the national championship, right? Indiana State, the national championship, UNLV in the Final Four, 1991, and then, of course, more recently, the 2015 Kentucky Wildcats. So now I think Gonzaga, of course, is a little bit different. I mean, if you look at the numbers of those teams, but still, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's hard to do what Gonzaga is trying to do right now. And I think that was one of the eye-opening pieces from Coach Mark Few, is I think he recognizes, like, look, every round is going to get a little bit tougher. But I just think that he has his guys in a zone where they revel in it. They're not intimidated by getting an undefeated season or not. They're just reveling in the opportunity to try and make history, be the first since 1976 to go undefeated. And the one thing I'll say about Coach Few and Gonzaga, they celebrate every win like they've just won a national championship, because you have some teams that are very subdued. They don't want to, they're superstitious. They don't want to go and celebrate. But Gonzaga likes to celebrate every win they get. They're celebrating. Coach Few's doing headstands, and the water's going off in the locker room, so they know how to celebrate. And I think that just shows you the type of coach Mark Few is. That once it's game time, the guys are locked in, but they can also celebrate and enjoy this run, because as he said after the Elite Eight, like, what's the use of just celebrating right at the end? Take the moment to enjoy each accomplishment, because it's so huge for a program like Gonzaga.
So one of the players that gets the tutelage of Mark Few is Canadian Andrew Nembhard, and he's one of 23 that started in this year's NCAA tournament on the men's side. What does this say for Canada basketball and that so many players are coming through the NCAA ranks and playing at such a high level?
Huge, Josh. I mean, I've spoken with a lot of people over the last couple weeks, and when I've been spotlighting a few Canadians, including Andrew Nembhard, and look, I mean, Canadians have always been there, but they just haven't been noticed as much. I think there's just been a great effort to just market the Canadians who are in NCAA basketball. And to me, what's great about Andrew Nembhard's story is, I mean, he started at the University of Florida, and things didn't work out one way or the other from there, so he transfers. And he transfers to Gonzaga, right? Like, and when I spoke with his dad, Claude Nembhard, who's very involved in the basketball scene here in Canada and Ontario, like that was part of his decision. Like, he wanted to go to a championship caliber program to be able to not only improve, but also make an impact. And it's amazing for Mark Few. He tells this story where, because I think there was an issue about whether or not Andrew could be even eligible to play because of the transfer portal. So once he was granted eligibility, Mark went to his freshman starting guard, Jalen Suggs, who's going to be probably a top 5 pick in this draft. And he explained the situation. I mean, we're going to get this kid, Andrew Nembhard from Florida. He's a really good player. What do you feel about it? And Jalen just lit up. He smiled. He said, coach, like, of course I'll be fine with it. Because, some players, you never know, right? They, this is where they maybe begin their egos, and they don't want to, have minute restrictions because another player comes in. But Jalen was very open to it. The team was open to it. And Andrew's had a real impact on this team. I mean, whether it's passing, whether it's, creating offense for his teammates. So it's just great to see. I mean, Canada basketball continuing to succeed. These players coming here, going to top prep schools in the U.S., getting noticed, and now playing on these big stages. And the education that they're learning, playing on these big stages where the pressure is high, is only going to serve them well as they move on in their careers.
It's going to serve them and Canada basketball if they choose to play for them as they move forward. So that's another big one. So any other Canadian standouts from the tournament for you? I mean, we had lots to choose from.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with a couple that I featured. I mean, Maurice Kalou for Oregon State was awesome. I mean, this is a guy who, really interesting story. I mean, he grew up in Windsor, Ontario. And I mean, when you think of Windsor, you think of hockey and farming fields, right? You don't think of basketball. I'm allowed to say that because I have family from Windsor. So it's all good for your listeners that, are wondering that. But anyway, so he's from Windsor. He then, goes to Oklahoma State. But then, one thing or another, he then leaves Oklahoma State. And then he plays JUCO, community college, for a year. And I think that really lit a fire under him, because it said, okay, like, I have to refocus. I have to get better. And he spent hours upon hours in the gym, making sure that he was ready to go if a college basketball program called him. And it turned out to be Oregon State. And he was awesome off the bench for that team. I mean, when you think of looking for a spark of energy, I mean, the head coach of Oregon State, Wayne Tinkle, said, like, he was that guy coming off the bench to really just provide that spark for scoring and to allow them to succeed. And then the other player was for Oregon, Eugene Omarori. He's from Rexdale, Ontario, and just another great story there where, real guy from, who's making not only Canada proud, but also Nigeria proud. I mean, he immigrates from Nigeria to Canada, and that, basketball allowed him to sort of assimilate into Canadian culture and really allow him to find his place in Canada and society. And I think he really balled out this tournament as well. I mean, just another example of veteran leadership, another example of someone who transferred. I mean, he was at Rutgers to start his career and then sort of surprisingly transfers from Rutgers to Oregon and finds his place on that offense. And he, of course, is an Orangeville Prep product. And Orangeville Prep is where Canadian Jamal Murray went to play high school basketball. So those were the two standouts for me. Both guys, I mean, advancing, Eugene to the Sweet 16, Maurice to the Elite Eight. And another example, again, of winding journeys for some of these guys, but finding their way and making an impact on college basketball's biggest stage.
And I mean, speaking of Eugene making an impact for Oregon this season, averaging 16.7 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 2.2 assists a game is not bad at all.
Not at all. I mean, and again, a guy he's all about winning. As Coach Dana Altman said, Josh, I mean, this is someone that, again, really wins. He's a real family guy, really wants to, really make an impact using his basketball platform to help people in Nigeria, people in Canada. So just a real great human being, and wishing him all the best going forward.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is good to hear. So we'll switch out of Canadian ones and move into players that are looking at the NBA draft this season. We've mentioned some of them already. One we haven't talked about yet is most likely first overall pick Cade Cunningham. What did you think of his tournament?
Little bit disappointing, Josh, to be honest with you. I think, he was great this season.
The final game as well.
So fun. Yeah, but to me, when the tournament happened, and I mean, I don't know the specifics as to why. I think, this is someone that obviously for opposing teams was the person that they really wanted to slow down. And I know in speaking with Oregon State members, because they, of course, beat Oklahoma State in the second round, that was another big upset. I mean, that was sort of their goal, right, is to make Cade Cunningham feel uncomfortable. But there's no doubt, I mean, this guy's a special player. I mean, you speak with people like Mike Boynton, the head coach of Oklahoma State. You speak with Kevin Boyle, who's the head coach of the Montverde Academy in Florida, where Cade played high school ball. I mean, this kid's a special player. I hope he does well in the NBA. I mean, but I think what's great about this year is that it is a deep draft, and it's so hard to sort of weigh in on just a couple of games. I think you have to look at a larger sample to sort of see, but it's sort of similar to hockey in a way, Josh, where I mean, the World Juniors aren't the end all and be all, but those are sort of pressure moments, right? Where you sort of see, okay, what does a player have in these particular moments where the stage is bright and the pressure is high. Cade didn't do that this time around, but I have no doubt he's going to be a great NBA player and help whoever team gets him. And looking at Raptors Twitter right now, a fade for Cade. I feel like a lot of them would love to see him there. I mean, I'm not advocating for that, but I mean, I know that's big on Raptors Twitter minds these days.
Yes, I have seen that too. And the way the Raptors are playing, if they continue on the pace, they might be in very good position to get him or somebody else very good from this year's draft. So, Lucas, thank you so much for joining me again to chat NCAA basketball and get ready for tomorrow night's games. Are you excited? You're looking forward to them, I would imagine?
Oh, I mean, I was at the Final Four 2 years ago in Minneapolis. I mean, pre-pandemic, we didn't. I mean, it was full stadium. I was, had the absolute pleasure to cover that experience, and it's a great event. It's a great celebration for college basketball, and it's not going to be the same, but I think it's still going to have that energy. It's still going to have that anticipation. I'm really looking forward to these two games, and I'm hoping for Gonzaga Baylor. I think that's been sort of the matchup that people have wanted for a while now for the national championship. But it is the madness for a reason when upsets happen. And I'm looking forward to expecting the unexpected. So it should be a fun final couple days of the NCAA tournament.
This is why they play the games. So I want to thank my guest, Lukas Weese, for joining me. Lukas, have a great day, and we will talk soon.
Thanks so much, Josh.
All right, so that was my guest, Lukas Weese. I hope that everybody enjoyed it and got caught up and ready for March Madness action on Saturday, starting with the Baylor Bears against the Houston Cougars, followed by Gonzaga Bulldogs against the UCLA Bruins. Is UCLA going to be able to continue their storybook run, or is Gonzaga going to continue their perfect season? Who knows, but I know that we are going to have some fantastic basketball, and make sure to check back to Sports Talk Line for all of your coverage. I have been your host, Joshua Griffith. This has been the Unnamed Sports Show on the Sports Talk Line Network. And remember, sports fans, love sports, all sports.